Hi, it's Dominic from the MS Guide. Have you ever wondered why your doctor goes off to medical conferences? What they do in these lovely exotic locations sometimes? What goes on at a medical conference? Who pays for it? Why are they there? And more importantly, how does it benefit you or me as the patient for our doctors to go and do this? I'm really fortunate because I'm joined by Professor Amos Korchin, and he is one of the organizers of something called Controversies in Neurology, which is one of the many large conferences that happen every year in neurology. And he's agreed to come onto the MS Guide and explain what's in it for the doctors, why they do it, and ultimately how that benefits us. Anything we discuss that you might want to look up, something like that, will all be in the show notes. Now, this is a podcast with video, as they all seem to be, but it's available on all the major podcast platforms. So Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, who's doing podcasts now. And what I would like is we're ruled by the algorithm. We really are. And it makes a huge difference to me. If you click like and subscribe on whatever platform it is that you use, that tells the algorithm to give this kind of content to more people who have the sort of interests that you do and the reason that you're here. So I'd be super grateful if you click like and subscribe. You can support the MS Guide because I don't take funding from any large organizations or anything like that. It's purely a patient-funded enterprise. I don't make a living from it or anything like that. You can support me for less than the cost of a cup of coffee a month if you go on Patreon, and all the links will be below again. So if you want to do that, or YouTube, you can click the super thanks button. And all of those things mean that I get a little bit of money towards the running costs of this channel. But anyway, let's get on with the show and we'll meet Professor Korchin. Professor Korchin, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being with you. Thank you very much, Dominic.
Please, may I call you Amos?
Yes, please. And
Thank you.
I'm based in Tel Aviv. Where are you now?
I am sitting just south of Oxford.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
well, I've been to Tel Aviv before. It's lovely. I just think the weather was so gorgeous compared to England, where it's just cold and rainy half the time.
Right.
So it was I have fond memories of going there. I went there for work once, so well twice I think, but working for an Israeli technology company,
Uh-huh.
and it was you went where the work took you, and if they said come to Tel Aviv, that's where you went. So it's anyway, Amos, I'm really happy that you've joined me because I know we were talking before. I wanted to do something because my primary audience is other MS patients like me. And though I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry long ago in the past, I've heard a lot of people make slightly tongue-in-cheek remarks going, oh, my doctor's at a conference. Oh, they're doing this. Oh, they're going to these fantastical locations and all this kind of stuff. And I know it sounds nice. It's like it sounds glamorous to say, gosh, I was in Tel Aviv. But really, I went to the airport. I went to the hotel. I went to the client's office. I went to the hotel and I went back to the airport. And my actual chance to, should we say, have a holiday, it wasn't there because it was work. So medical conferences,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it and thinking, what does my neurologist learn when they go away and do this that benefits me, the patient? What would you say the primary benefit for a doctor to go to a conference is?
Well, meet friends, enjoy the place, but of course also teach and learn. So I think this is a formal thing that you want to learn things. You know that science always develops. There are always new things, and so I've been in the business for 60 years or so. The things that I learned in school are not relevant to a large extent anymore.
No.
And when I sit in local conferences in our hospital in Tel Aviv Medical Center, there are things that are new to me every week. And I sit there because I want to absorb the new things. I want to know what is it all about and how are we going to deal with it? How we are going to discuss it, how are we going to use it. So these are the important things that we try to achieve in conferences. So
I,
go ahead.
that's fascinating because you said something right at the beginning of your answer that I just want to touch on. When you are the person doing the teaching or the lecturing, call it like that, and I've been both teaching and receiving, it makes you work so hard because you realize that you're in front of all your colleagues and you want to get it right and you want to deliver the best information to them. And in some ways, it improves you, the individual, even more by having to go through the rigor of preparing a good lecture.
Yes, indeed.
So, and I don't know, I've been on conferences for work, not medical conferences, but you learn as much by standing around chatting to people at the coffee breaks or meeting somebody and going to supper. I find, that in some ways it's the unofficial learning.
Exactly. I think that you are absolutely right. And coffee breaks are very important. Our next conference will be in London, so we're going to serve tea as well, not just coffee. And but there is good coffee and good cookies to go along with it, and good food. So good opportunity to talk not only to your friends but the key opinion leaders who are there and are open to ask questions. And when you talk about learning from lectures, I learn a lot when I give lectures. So preparing a lecture and delivering a lecture
Yeah.
raises issue in my mind that I didn't think about before. So this is a good opportunity, an excellent opportunity for me. And I give lectures on Alzheimer's disease, let's say, several times over, and it's never the same. And it's always better than the last time I gave it, the same lecture. But it's not as good as the next time I'm going to give it. So I think that's it. And this is the truth for everything that we're doing in medical conferences.
Do you know what I like as well? When you're lecturing, the questions you get. Every now and then, somebody will ask a question which sort of hits your brain like a sledgehammer because you realize that you have not thought of something or they're making you think of it in a different way. And that's invaluable.
Yes, yes,
I
absolutely.
I just think the other thing I think is really interesting, the conference that you're organizing called the Controversies in Neurology, it does something that not all conferences do, and it brings together neurologists as a group, but many of the different subspecialties, because my experience as an outsider is good grief, medics can get really siloed and just talk to other neurologists who deal with MS. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, they're talking to people that deal with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and various other degenerative conditions.
Yeah, so as you say, Connie is in this respect at least unique, which
Mm.
combines the debates. So we don't just listen to lectures. We are coming to listen to fights. There are two opposing views, and I have my view, and I know that I'm right all the way. But there is somebody else who thinks otherwise. And if I have to confront this other person and they have to confront me, since we are all on the same level, we all know the things. So I give a lecture or we give lectures in a different way when we know that there is an opponent coming in, stepping in right after I finish and telling
It's a
us,
debate format, isn't it? Everybody's essentially in a nice way set against one another, debating a point, saying, this is my view, this is my view.
yeah. And there's time, of course, for questions and comments from the
Mm.
floor, and we have time to reply. So this is the issue, and so it's a game in a way, but it's a teaching game. So we learn from these duels a lot, and we learn, as you say, we learn about things that we never thought about, but we know how to answer issues that will be raised by our opponents. And of course, since it's a game, we also have a voting system.
Mm.
So at the end of the debate, everybody says who's for A and who's for B, and we compare these results to the vote that you had before. So, in MS, we have several topics that are going to be discussed. For example, this issue of radiologically isolated syndrome. What do you
Mm.
do when I'm as a physician, when I'm approached by a person who said, I had headache and they went and had my MRI, and they told me you have a lesion there that we didn't expect to see. It's not related to your headache. Maybe it's multiple sclerosis. So they come to me and ask me, what do I do? If I have multiple sclerosis, do I start treatment now, or do I have to wait until there is clinical appearance of
Mm.
the manifestation of this disease, if it is MS? So that by that time, I know that when I have this the new lesion, I know what is the nature of the lesion and what is the aggressiveness of this. Because if it happened a week later or 5 years later, when the new lesion appears, this makes a difference in my approach to this patient. So the question that we have, and this is a formal question, do we start treatment right away or do we wait? And of course, there are many issues there, individualism, but we are all under the influence of the industry, and the industry makes a point to try to push us to give the treatment right away, and maybe they are right.
This touches on something of a mutual friend of ours, Professor Schmirer.
Yes.
You're running the Attack MS trial, or trying to once it gets refunded, but to give a powerful, effective drug that's easily reversible. I mean, in this instance, they chose natalizumab, but to me, it's sort of almost walking that line in between. We want to see if treating early and aggressively is useful, but we don't want to use a drug like a B cell suppressor, which is going to have sort of permanent long term effects if you think actually this is not multiple sclerosis after a while. And I just find that fascinating because that obviously came out of discussion somewhere. Somebody sat down and said, I've got an idea.
Yeah, and the same thing also on the other side of the spectrum. Uh, do you ever stop the treatment? So there are many patients with multiple sclerosis who seem to be stable, have been treated for a number of years, and now should we continue? They say, I mean, there are these risks
Mm,
and the side effects, and we don't know. We know about the efficacy and we know about the safety of the drug in young people. These were the people in whom the studies were done. But now, when we're 50 years later or 30 years later, these people are older, and they were in their 30s, now they're in the 60s. They have comorbidities. Maybe the drugs are not as safe for them as they are
maybe.
for young people. So we have a debate on should we
Sure.
discontinue the drug and when.
I'm going to make an appeal to say at some point, I think there needs to be a patient perspective. And my view is, for example, there's a whole psychological thing here because you talk to patients and it's weird. The sort of conversations that patients have with doctors are clearly not the conversations they have with one another, but it's the whole feeling, and it may be entirely irrational from a purely empirical scientific point of view, people thinking that they're being abandoned. For example, I had a 71-year-old friend who was moved to cladribine, and I think three-quarters of it was the feeling that she was not being overlooked or abandoned or put on the shelf, or call it what you will, as and she's happy to take the potential risks of the medicine because she feels she's being treated. So, and the fact that her mental state is so positive as a result, you wonder. I mean, it's one of these things that it needs to be debated and discussed, but you
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah,
think you're
so,
right that
so
there's no firm answer, but it's good to talk about it, isn't it?
and in Coney, the people who give the presentations are really key opinion leaders. So, for
Yeah.
example, you mentioned our friend Klaus Schmirer. And in this debate that I've just mentioned, should we stop treatment after a long period of silence? He said, no, you should continue. And I don't know how he's going to justify this, but probably one of the things that he may use is this point that you have just alluded to, that these people, after being treated by a drug for many, many years, feel that this is like the cane that supports them. And just
Mm.
taking away this, may cause them some problems right away. So, and there are many issues, scientific and the others, who are to be discussed. So this is another point that we want to raise there, and so on. So
Absolutely. Look, we could go round and round. I think another. I'm just going to make the point. I hear people make what I consider to be very cynical and poorly informed remarks that, oh, everybody gets paid for by drug companies and they're all being brainwashed. And I know for the fact that these days doctors are having to pay for it. They tend to have a budget, when they're professors and stuff, to go and do academic training and keep up with this. They're no longer the, should we say, drug company funded potential jollies of 40 years ago. This is very much individuals, isn't it? Looking to improve themselves and looking to go and learn and share their knowledge.
yeah, of course, yes.
Mm.
So one other point that we're going to bring up as a debate in Connie in London next March is this issue of the viruses and how they are involved in multiple sclerosis. And there are data coming in all the time, particularly lately for EB virus, Epstein-Barr virus. And this virus has been shown to be a factor maybe causing MS. But the question then is: is it only the initiation of the disease, or does it play a
Mm.
role also in its continuation? And this is very important because we have, of course,
I
therapy.
hope. Mm.
Yeah,
I hope you have Professor David Baker debating Professor Gavin Giovannoni because I know they tend to hold slightly different views, even though they're from the same institution, and that would be a really interesting
the,
debate because also patients tend to like things. It's my experience that they want definitive binary answers. This is the reason. This isn't the reason, and
yeah,
it's super interesting to find out. Shall we say all the nuances behind something? Maybe, maybe not. But the one other thing, I think the other specialties talking to one another.
yeah,
My thing is if you look at HSCT, some neurologists treat it like a hand grenade with the pin out, and if you speak to a hematologist, they're kind of baffled because this is something they do day in day out. So it really is, to me, the environment in which that person exists, the hematologist or the neurologist,
yeah.
and that really can change their view. And I think for them to be able to share their information and concerns and knowledge will help advance things for patients because that ultimately, to me, it may sound facile, but it's us at the end of the day. I'm not being selfish. It's just, it's about us. All this scientific stuff is lovely, but it's how to improve the lot of their fellow human being, the person who has MS. And we're relying on our neurologists to really be at the forefront of the knowledge, not 10 years behind. So I think it's fantastic that these conferences happen.
And
And I'm really grateful that you're putting one on.
and
But
of course,
I just wanted to,
Gavin Giovannoni will be a presenter in this very debate, and he's going
yeah,
to
I know.
say that EB virus may be an initiator, but it's not involved in the
Mm,
progression of the disease. And of course, there's
mm.
the implications about how we deal with these patients with MS who have antibodies. Should we treat them? Should we immunize them against EBV? And so on.
Oh, and then there's this sort of few case studies of the people who have they're being treated with antivirals for the AIDS, and it may be the case that some of their MS seems to be suppressed, or I'm not sure the right but to me it's one of these super complicated melting pots, and I'm so grateful that people are getting together to talk about it. So,
Yeah.
Amos, thank you very, very much for just coming to help us, the patients, understand a bit more about what's going on and why. And hopefully, people will get some sort of insight into when they look at their neurologist in a face-to-face appointment, what they may have been doing when they went off to Amsterdam, for example, or to London. It wasn't just hooray, a holiday,
Yes.
but they were learning something. So,
Yes.
Amos, I'll disclose now, I'm coming to Controversies in Neurology. So I really look forward to meeting you face to face in March.
Face to face we are, but to actually shake hands.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, you're correct. To actually, what do the Americans call it? Press the flesh.
That's right.
So, Amos,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye bye.
Cheers.